8:47 p.m. Eastern Time, Friday, the 13th of March, 2026. The Situation Room is plunged into darkness, with the only source of light coming from the rows of screens. Somewhere hidden in the northern Persian Gulf, approximately 480 kilometers north of the Strait of Hormuz, a coral island barely 5 miles long named Kharg is engulfed in flames. Thick columns of smoke rise clearly visible through satellite lenses. That smoke reaches out into space itself. And then, the figure behind this blaze casually announces the event on the Truth Social platform. But the story doesn't end there. The post states unequivocally that just minutes earlier, under his orders, forces under the U.S. Central Command unleashed one of the most ferocious airstrikes ever seen in the Middle East, thereby completely wiping out military strongholds on Iran's priceless gem, namely Kharg Island. Every word is boldly capitalized, utterly unambiguous, broadcast directly to 90 million followers even before any press conference, any briefing, or any phone call to allied nations. What unfolds is the 14th day of a blood-soaked front that has already claimed over 1,000 lives, being pushed to the brink solely by a single social media post seemingly ordinary at first glance, but in reality, far more tense. The noteworthy point is that no one has exposed the hidden angle behind that post for you. A third line appears, carrying both concession and a spear pointed straight at the global financial system. America's arsenal is the most advanced and powerful in the world, yet out of humanitarian considerations, I have decided to spare the oil infrastructure on this island. The concept of humanity is uttered right amid the barrage of arrows and bullets. In a moment, we will dissect this term along with the deep strategic calculations embedded within it. Nevertheless, first and foremost, when placing yourself in this context, you must grasp the position of Kharg Island, because overlooking it will render all subsequent developments meaningless. This island lies about 35 miles off Iran's Bushehr province. Its area is roughly the size of New York City's Central Park. In compensation, its loading and unloading capacity reaches the threshold of 7 million barrels per day, encompassing up to 90% of Iran's crude oil exports. You heard correctly, the figure is 90%. No need for pipelines or storage tanks. Everything resides right on that patch of land in the middle of the sea. The majority of this black gold flows toward China and India, sufficient to demonstrate the island's weight not only confined within Iran's domestic energy sector, but also extending to dominate the international oil trading floor. Therefore, when Donald Trump declares the flattening of military points on Kharg while leaving the oil extraction system intact, that is not an act of mercy. That action resembles holding a knife to the throat of the entire global energy network and issuing a condition: I will sheathe the knife, but only if Iran obediently follows my words. Its essence does not lie in humanity. It is a coercive chess move. At this very moment, in the morning of Saturday, public opinion everywhere is holding its breath, watching whether Iran will yield or not. Hold on. Before guessing what move Iran will make next, we must step back to see what just transpired in the half hour immediately following that post on the Truth Social platform. The point is that a variable has emerged, overturning all initial projections. A thing that officials whisper to each other is both a cry of desperation at the end of the road and a faint glimmer of escape. In a bit, we will delve deeper into this detail. The first signal is sketched out through roughly 1,000 words. Dear viewers, please continue listening. Let us rewind the timeline to the 28th of February, 2026, because this war did not originally ignite from Kharg Island. Its source stems from a villa tucked away on the outskirts of Tehran. It erupted from an elimination operation. In the mid-morning of February 28, the U.S.-Israeli coalition joined hands to strike Iran, unleashing up to 900 bombing sorties in a mere 12 hours of opening for the campaign that America named Operation Epic Fury. The targets of these strikes were Iran's missile arrays and air defense networks, along with military strongholds and their top leadership. Officials on both the American and Israeli sides revealed that the timing of the initial gunfire was largely based on the opportunity to neutralize Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, right before he could find a place to hide. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei perished in the very opening salvo. 900 blows landed in half a day. The then-incumbent supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran, who had held power for a full 34 years, fell on the very opening day. Many would be gravely mistaken if they stubbornly believed this shock did not completely overturn all subsequent moves. Remember to stay tuned so as not to miss the thrilling developments ahead. Amid the chaotic battlefield, this decapitation strike ignited a chain of upheavals. An empty throne of power appeared, and immediately the most formidable faces of Iran rushed in to fill the gap. CIA reports indicate that a prominent IRGC member would take Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's place, while his son Mojtaba Khamenei, who narrowly escaped death in the bombing on March 4, was publicly named the new supreme leader. No democratic election took place, nor was there any constitutional procedure. All was merely a rapid handover by a regime desperately struggling for survival. Please firmly note the name Mojtaba Khamenei. This figure is renowned as the most iron-fisted among the bloodthirsty. And then another detail emerges. Through the announcer on Iran's state television, Mojtaba Khamenei issued threats to continue blockading the strait to pressure the opponent. That message also attached the prospect of upcoming bombardments targeting American bases in the region. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, the independent armed branch that operates apart from the government and pays no heed to civilian President Masoud Pezeshkian's orders, but only follows directives from the supreme leader. This group views the current chaos as a once-in-a-millennium opportunity. It sounds simple, but the situation is far more complicated. The representative from IRGC's Khatam al-Anbiya headquarters bluntly declared that any vessel linked to the US, Israel, or their allies is a legitimate target. Don't even dream of artificially suppressing oil prices. Prepare yourselves for $200 per barrel. This representative emphasized the $200 per barrel mark. As you hear this, let's examine how this figure impacts your own wallet. Right now, as you follow the story, Brent crude, the world's common benchmark, has surged more than 9% because traders are on edge ahead of the risk that the energy sector will be turned upside down for weeks or even months on end. The figure is currently hovering around $101 per barrel. The AAA Association just finalized data on Saturday, recording an average of $3.68 per gallon of gasoline in the US, up 23% since the first shots were fired. That price level is the story of right now. The issue lies in a chain reaction collapse taking shape that no one dares speak plainly about. If the Strait of Hormuz is truly sealed shut, the smoke and fire of war will slice away roughly 8 million barrels of the world's oil each day, based on figures from the International Energy Agency. Suppose the price skyrockets to $200 per barrel, exactly as IRGC flexes its muscles. The experts at Goldman Sachs have outlined a scenario where the S&P 500 index evaporates 15 to 20% in just 1 month. Americans will have to pump gas at $9 per gallon. Jet fuel costs will shackle the entire civilian aviation sector. Skyrocketing fertilizer prices will collapse the daily food production chain. The conflict disrupts roughly 20% of the oil flowing through the Strait of Hormuz, driving Brent crude from the $70 mark up to over $110 per barrel in just a few dawns. All of that unfolds in exactly 14 days. Imagine if it stretches to 60 days or 90 days. The Congressional Research Service has sounded the alarm that up to 27% of maritime cargo related to crude oil and petroleum products must pass through this strait. The figure does not stop at 20%, but 27% carrying along helium gas for semiconductor chips, sulfur for fertilizer, and LNG for heating European homes, those still struggling to wean off Russian gas. But the story does not end there. Then, the first turning point appears. The moment when everything flips completely. Right on March 13, hours before Mr. Trump typed his post about Kharg Island on Truth Social, an extremely strange piece of news was quietly whispered by a high-ranking Iranian figure to CNN. This high-level figure revealed to CNN that Tehran is conceding to let a few ships pass through, provided the transactions are settled in Chinese yuan rather than US dollars. Chinese yuan pondered this detail carefully. A nation like Iran with its fleet in tatters, defense grid in ruins, supreme leader fallen on the opening day of war, yet showing no interest in suing for peace. They absolutely do not beg for compassion. These people are demanding to reshape the global energy payment chessboard. They want to pull Beijing in as the real guarantor for the Strait of Hormuz in exchange for letting the black gold flow again. These words hardly sound like the tone of a defeated side. This is the card of a faction fully aware it holds the vital throat choke point, one that even the planet's most notorious armed force cannot simply bomb into submission. As for Mr. Trump, it's unclear whether he fully grasps the hidden implications, but he has poured cold water by aiming straight at Kharg Island along with 90 military targets. The barrage has obliterated more than 90 fortified points of Iran's military, including missile launch sites, yet spared the oil-pumping system. According to the U.S. Central Command, from the Jask Naval Port, Air Traffic Control Tower, helicopter hangar to air defense arrays, all have turned to smoke. Yet the colossal oil terminal, capable of handling the equivalent of 3 million barrels per day, remains unscathed. At first glance, quite ordinary, but behind it lies a grand calculation. This warning is not intended for Iran. It aims straight at China, India, Japan, or South Korea, those names living off the energy milk from that island. The message rings clear. In my hand is a hostage. Its name is Kharg Island, and I will only strike if you force me to the end of the road. Moving into Saturday, Mr. Trump called out to a series of nations to immediately dispatch warships to the Strait of Hormuz to safeguard their own oil rice bowls. On the very Truth Social platform, the president penned, "Hopefully China, France, Japan, South Korea, the UK, along with those parties suffering from this deliberate choke point, will send ships straight there." Try pondering the diplomatic weight behind that statement. Mr. Trump is pressuring China, Iran's largest oil buyer, the country that once sent a special envoy to broker peace, the place holding the financial pipelines feeding IRGC to deploy warships to erect a blockade against the very supplier selling to it. He is forcing Beijing into choosing one of two: either maintain business ties with Iran or address its energy thirst. Beijing's leadership is being cornered against the wall. Beijing remains silent in the eyes of the public for now. Nevertheless, the astute understand that Beijing always has covert moves ready. At this juncture, let us discuss the third figure sitting in that room, the face we mentioned right from the opening minutes. Though no one points fingers or names outright, this man's shadow blankets all negotiation sessions, infiltrates every back-channel line, and envelops the shuttle diplomacy efforts unfolding right now in Muscat, Doha, and Geneva. That figure bears the name Steve Witkoff, and the root cause dragging Kharg Island into flames tonight stems directly from his botched chess moves. Dear viewers, please rewind to the 26th of February, 2026. That was less than 2.5 days before the rain of bombs poured down. The two figures, Witkoff and Jared Kushner, were seated in a meeting room in Geneva less than 48 hours before the U.S. Israeli coalition unleashed strikes on Iranian soil on February 28. Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, had an encounter with Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, in Geneva for the third round of talks, with Oman acting as the bridge to finalize a nuclear commitment. Despite Omani Foreign Minister Badr bin Hamad al-Busaidi viewing both the U.S. and Iran as making significant strides toward a nuclear agreement in the February 26 meeting, and having scheduled a follow-up on March 2 for deeper technical discussions, Mr. Trump bluntly criticized that he was not at all pleased with the progress or the haggling manner of both sides. He was completely dissatisfied. Exactly 2 days later, artillery shells began plowing the ground. 10,000 lives by this moment, some dead, others wounded. The gateway through the Strait of Hormuz slammed shut. Oil prices soared past the $100 per barrel mark, and every event revolves around those three words: not satisfied. It sounds simple, but the consequences are immeasurable. The issue lies in what the Omani mediators whispered among themselves a different story. A Gulf region diplomat, well-versed in the discussions, revealed to the press that Mr. Witkoff's recounting of that life-or-death exchange was in fact a distortion of the truth. This diplomat asserted that the Iranian representatives in that Geneva room did not boast about bomb-making material. In reality, they were offering to relinquish it. The Iranian side signaled to Mr. Witkoff that the country accepts setting aside its enriched uranium stockpile as part of a fresh commitment with Mr. Trump. Iran's entire enriched uranium repository, amounting to 10,000 kilograms that U.S. officials cited as the major pretext for opening fire, was laid bare on the negotiation table at that moment, awaiting crating and shipment beyond national borders. Yet instead of carrying that goodwill back to report to the president, Mr. Witkoff was said to have painted the session as a tangled mess of no value. Mr. Witkoff fundamentally lacked the depth of technical expertise or years of diplomatic experience to play the role of an effective negotiator. His ignorance and misreporting of Iran's stance and nuclear project throughout the process very likely skewed Mr. Trump's perspective, leading him to believe the talks were stagnating and Iran was merely stalling without sincerity. This is not baseless rumor. It is plainly what officials responsible for arms control have dared to state openly to the public, with black and white documentation. The situation has become smoke and fire that has now taken more than 1,400 Iranian lives, 13 American soldiers, 773 innocent Lebanese civilians, while creating the most harrowing energy famine since the 1973 oil embargo, likely partly due to a real estate dealer who remained clueless about distinguishing a centrifuge from a reactor. And then another detail emerges. Nevertheless, right at this second curve, the ground beneath begins to tremble again. Setting aside all the previous tangles, rising above the roar of bombs, fallen bodies, blazing oil tankers, and the sealed strait, faint rays of hope still seep through this very night. These are signals emitted in silence, the kind that never surface on the Truth Social platform. Since the bombardment on Kharg Island, Iran should logically know better and lower its weapons to salvage whatever fragments remain of its nation. Mr. Trump typed these lines on Truth Social. The fake news media is furious because they refuse to report how splendidly American troops have performed in thoroughly thrashing Iran, leaving them utterly defeated and desperately craving a commitment, yet regrettably not the kind I would approve. He separated it out, utterly defeated, desperately craving a commitment. Dear viewers, ponder this segment carefully. He did not say Iran is turning its back on a truce. He implied they thirst for a settlement, except the draft at hand has not yet met his approval. This is precisely the stance of someone bargaining at the negotiation table, not a fiery declaration demanding slaughter without regard for life or death. It is a door that seems to have slammed shut but whose inner latch remains unfastened. Top officials from Oman, Egypt, Pakistan, and Turkey are whispering behind the curtain with Iran's high-ranking figures, urgently kindling communication channels with Mr. Trump's administration toward an agreement or even a laying down of arms. Four nations rolling up their sleeves, working simultaneously right in the midst of this 14th day, shrouded in smoke and fire. The nation of Oman steadfastly raises the flag of mediation, firmly believing a way out still exists. Mr. Badr bin Hamad al-Busaidi, the very Omani foreign minister, who shuttled messages between Mr. Witkoff and Mr. Arachi in the Geneva meeting room half a month ago, remains firmly in his seat, still on standby, still ready to pick up the phone. There is still one more knot. One of the most dramatic political shifts in the first 7 days of gunfire is the starkly exposed discord between Iran's civilian president and the IRGC team. On March 7, President Masoud Pezeshkian personally apologized to the Gulf nations, signaling a promise that Iran would refrain from touching neighbors unless struck first from their soil. Yet mere hours later, the IRGC-backed parliamentary speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf loudly reversed that promise before the public, threatening that Gulf nations hosting American bases remain squarely in the crosshairs. Two pronouncements, two different mouths, sharing the same national soil. This is precisely the internal festering sore that every diplomat lingering in the region is striving to widen further. This is a key playing card, and here is what officials whisper in closed chambers. The path to extinguishing this flame has never passed through the hands of stubborn hardliners. From ancient times, such a thing has never existed. The IRGC team, General Hossein Salami, Parliamentary Speaker Ghalibaf, or the newly ascended Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei, this crowd has no desire whatsoever for reconciliation. They only seek survival. They want to cling tightly to power in an Iran once the bombs cease. In their eyes, signing an agreement equates to discarding the painstakingly enriched uranium stockpile, tossing away the missile array, severing the tangled proxy routes across the region. That sort of deal does not grant Iran a path to live on, but turns them into a worthless puppet crowd. Their throne of power will dissolve into thin air. Therefore, they resolve to fight to the death. They keep brandishing the $200 oil benchmark as a threat. They will aim Khyber missiles straight at Israeli soil. They will stubbornly hold the strait sealed as long as possible. Yet President Masoud Pezeshkian, Foreign Minister Arakchi, or the civilian leadership cadre, no matter how steeped in ideology, deep down understand that this slaughtering wheel cannot sustain itself long. At minimum, 1,444 lives have turned to ashes, and 18,051 bare wounds from the U.S.-Israeli coalition's fury poured onto Iranian soil since February 28. Iran's health ministry laments that power grids, schools, and hospitals lie in ruins. The aerial defense net is riddled with holes. Nearly the entire naval fleet of this nation now befriends seaweed on the ocean floor. Mr. Trump boomed that the Jask naval base perched prominently on Kharg Island was swept clean from the previous night. Regarding the naval mines Iran stealthily scattered across the strait, the U.S. Central Command proudly declared it had blown apart 16 specialized mine-laying vessels of theirs, along with countless warships lurking near the Strait of Hormuz. CENTCOM asserted firmly that they had pulverized a total of 28 gathering points. The real physical capacity to stubbornly seal the strait is eroding minute by minute, and Mr. Pezeshkian fully perceives that. At first glance, ordinary, but the pressure weighs heavily on decisions. When you look at the current deadlock, we stand before the third fork, a variable yet to erupt, but very likely to crash down within the next 24 hours. The situation leads people to revisit the ceasefire round in June 2025, the occasion when Qatar conducted back-channel mediation, coupled with Mr. Trump's willingness to accept Iran's face-saving pretext, viewing it as a reusable script. Regrettably, the strategic chessboard of 2026 carries an entirely different shape. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei no longer lives. The IRGC leadership is like a snake without a head, while America flips its cards openly with maximalist demands forcing regime change, forcing complete dismantlement of the nuclear network. The problem lies precisely there. Recall back in June 2025, amid the 1-2-day clash, Tehran enlisted Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Oman to urgently press U.S. President Donald Trump to muzzle Israel, compelling an immediate halt to strikes on Iran in exchange for greater flexibility at the nuclear negotiation table. That move proved remarkably astute then. Mr. Trump nodded to accept that face-saving performance, then joyfully proclaimed victory for all. The roar of artillery fell silent, but that was a matter of 12 days. This time has already reached the 14th day, and the targets on both sides have begun swelling like a spreading disease. Back in 2025, America only aimed to restrain Iran's nuclear workshop. By 2026, Mr. Pete Hegseth, holding the top post at Trump's Defense Department, added the item regime change straight into the war's to-do list. The distance between merely sending aircraft to drop precision bombs and then returning versus mobilizing troops to swallow an entire nation is vast indeed. And the bloodthirsty crowd within IRGC fully grasps this. If America resolutely demands toppling the leadership, putting an end to the Islamic Republic, then no contract will be signed cleanly. Only resistance to the end. And with IRGC's doctrine of ready martyrdom, holding the line in defiance is as glorious as claiming a championship trophy. And then, another detail emerges. The noteworthy thing is that certain matters are concealed and not told to you. Only China alone holds both the economic noose strangling Iran's neck and the enormous strategic profit if gunfire ceases, advantage that other major players cannot even catch up to by carrying sandals. The negotiation framework brokered by China, such as one side temporarily turning a blind eye to nuclear monitoring while the other halts bombing, is currently the brightest crack through which to slip. China has long been Iran's biggest oil buyer. It is also the very place where Iran is haggling to lock oil trade prices in yuan. China has already stationed a heavyweight envoy hovering in the region right as we speak, and this nation's eagerness to fling open the Strait of Hormuz has nothing to do with lofty ideals. It is a matter of survival to keep the rice bowl intact. The entire group of China, India, Japan, plus South Korea has already swallowed 75% of the oil and 59% of LNG spilling from the Gulf region. Merely if that strait remains tightly shut for another month, factories in China will begin shrinking. Then China's economic plunge will drag America gasping for air and pull the whole world under. No president would foolishly invite such disaster upon themselves during their term, not even the one currently occupying the White House. It sounds simple, but conceals far too many calculations. The situation has become that now you must fix your gaze on movements from Beijing, not Washington nor Tehran. Beijing is playing the role of a covert player that the world pays little attention to, yet may be fingering the key ring deciding the fate of the coming 72 hours. Imagine a Chinese special envoy striding boldly into a closed room to meet Mr. Pezeshkian's right-hand team, extending a promise to stand as guarantor for Iran's oil sales revenue in yuan, offering to step in and twist Washington's arm, then suggesting pulling Oman back to the mediator's chair. That is precisely the script capable of sealing all troubles shut or igniting fresh flames. But regrettably, there is a massive boulder blocking this script. Right this very night, the IRGC side is poised to pour more oil on the fire, pushing the situation to a point where all bargaining appears illusory. Al Jazeera reporter Tawhid Asadi from deep inside Tehran reports furiously that the rain of bombs from the US-Israeli alliance is pouring down everywhere across the land, from Tehran, Kharg, Isfahan, all the way to Tabriz. He concludes that this state of affairs proves we are still far from reaching the two words de-escalation. Iran's top leadership is loudly plotting retaliation, while the IRGC faction keeps mentioning unleashing their most cutting-edge hot weapons, including using Khyber missiles to pound straight into Israeli territory. Those Khyber missiles, frankly speaking, the line of ballistic missiles that slice the wind at hypersonic speed, the kind that Israel's interception net can only grimace at without reaching much. Should IRGC press the button tonight to unleash the Khyber array straight toward Tel Aviv, then Prime Minister Netanyahu, the man whose political survival at home depends on fanning this war flame to its peak, will surely scream for a thunderous counterstrike, far exceeding the script America is currently drawing. And remember one thing, just days ago, Mr. Netanyahu himself bluntly warned Mr. Witkoff face-to-face not to foolishly trust the Iranian side. That man harbors not the slightest intent of seeking an ally to retreat. He is the type who aims only to charge straight to the finish line. But the story does not end there. Qatar's Interior Ministry officials announced on Saturday that they are hurriedly evacuating residents from several hotspots amid Iran revving up its aerial revenge campaign against Gulf neighbors. The group affirmed they had intercepted 2 missiles after the public panicked upon hearing sharp explosions echoing right in the capital Doha. Mentioning Doha, this has been the dressing room for Middle Eastern politicians for decades, the place where Hamas once came to bargain, the stage for Taliban clashing with America, and also the table where Witkoff and Kushner once sat side by side to align their chess moves. Yet this bustling hub is now chaotically herding civilians to flee. When you witness that scene, you are seeing with your own eyes the diplomatic foundation collapsing into ruins right before you. Meanwhile, far in Europe, French President Emmanuel Macron is rallying international friends to laboriously untie the energy noose with the aim of letting oil flows, natural gas, and goods resume free circulation once circumstances permit. The noteworthy point is that phrase, "once circumstances permit," is now shouldering an enormous burden on the diplomatic front. It lays bare a cruel truth that no escort fleet, no safe sea corridor, nor any military stratagem has room to perform while bombs still rain overhead and Iran's shore-based anti-ship missile arrays stand ready to fire below. A retired French admiral put it bluntly after hanging up his sword. In today's boiling cauldron, sending warships or even merchant vessels to poke their noses into the Strait of Hormuz is no different from tying one's own noose. Only a ceasefire agreement with the Iranian side can pull this quagmire from futile suicide down to a dangerous gamble. Only then can armed vessels charge in. From the boundary of suicide stepping to the boundary of danger. That is the target inching forward a little that everyone secretly hopes for. Yet regrettably, we have not yet touched it. At first glance ordinary, but behind it are life and death calculations. Now, let us flip to the figure carrying the heaviest weight right now. Not the price per barrel of oil, nor counting how many missiles. That figure is $3.68. The AAA Association just announced on Saturday that the average price for each gallon of gasoline in the U.S. is sitting at $3.68, up 23% since the first gunshot rang out. This price level is fully capable of delivering heavy blows to numerous corners of the American economy, dragging along food and drink costs, jet fuel, and fertilizer prices. Mr. Trump knows that figure well. He scrutinizes it exactly like staring at a stock ticker board. That is precisely the most vital figure in his political universe. Back in 2024, he won election partly thanks to promising to keep the energy sector smooth. Every cent it rises costs him political credibility. And right at this moment, despite him flattening strongholds on Kharg Island, that figure keeps climbing day by day. White House officials previously whispered that they eagerly await oil prices plunging without brakes once Operation Epic Fury wraps up. Regrettably, this Operation Epic Fury has no deadline whatsoever, Mr. Trump himself blurted it out to reporters on Friday night. This bombardment will drag on until it feels sufficient, then stop. The problem lies precisely in the greatest irony of this tangle. The tool brought out to straighten the oil matter is instead shattering that very oil sector. Every bomb dropped on Iranian soil adds more concrete to IRGC's resolve to stubbornly seal the strait. Every oil tanker turned away at Hormuz pushes Brent crude up another $1. It sounds simple, but the situation is far more complicated. The IEA side just recorded plainly in its monthly oil market report that the smoke and fire mess in the Middle East is disrupting supply at the most terrifying scale ever seen across the entire global oil wholesale system. Most terrifying ever. Not counting from 1973, nor from 1979. Most terrifying since the dawn of creation. However, reaching this point is when everything finally knots into a tangled mess. Because Mr. Trump's second message, the one tucked covertly inside the Kharg Island post, turns out to be syncing perfectly with several factions. Precisely on March 13, Turkey's Transport Minister Abdulkadir Uraloglu revealed that the Iranian side had just nodded approval for a Turkish vessel to slip through. People are also murmuring that as many as 2 gas carriers flying the Indian flag, plus 1 Saudi oil tanker carrying 1 million barrels pointed toward India, have just been granted passage. Iran is cautiously cracking open this strait in a selective manner. No way would they yield passage to American vessels, nor to cargo linked to Israel. They only open the path for a few neutral nations, Turkey, India, or Saudi Arabia shipping to India. That iron gate is slowly creaking ajar. But the story does not end there. This manner of conduct bears no resemblance whatsoever to the actions of a faction clinging solely to lofty ideals to tightly grip the strait. It is plainly the tactic of a faction wielding the strait as a tool to twist opponents' arms. Since it is a tool, it can always be set down. Since it is a tool, it can be traded outright. As for lofty ideals, don't even dream of it. Let us see what the appearance of the next 24 to 72 hours will look like. There are precisely 2 paths, and only 2. No middle road slips in at all. History has never had the habit of leaving a middle door in moments of life and death like this. The first path. The IRGC team presses the button to unleash the K-bar missile array straight toward Tel Aviv. The Israeli side slaps back by sending aircraft to bomb deep into Iran's civilian power grid, schools, and hospitals. The USS Gerald R. Ford carrier strike group, currently anchored off Israel's coast after departing Suda Bay on February 26, immediately receives orders to ready its guns to pulverize Iran's remaining naval bases in the Gulf. Iran will awaken any dormant sleeper cells still lingering in Bahrain, Kuwait, or the UAE. The U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, the place already evacuated of non-essential staff, will take a direct pounding. The count of 13 American soldiers lost will leap to 30. Then to 50. Oil hits the ceiling at $150. Gasoline in America reaches $6. The S&P 500 index plunges 12% in a mere 2 days and nights. Congress must hammer the gavel to convene an emergency session. The narrow crack for laying down arms, already tiny, now slams shut forever. And then the whole world awakens amid a slaughter with no visible finish line, devoid of any mediation channel, and without any shared interest left to hold each other back. It sounds simple, but the consequences are immeasurable. The second path, the nation of China dips its hand in. Circling within the next 24 hours, the envoy from Beijing will make his way to Mr. Pezeshkian's office, brushing aside the IRGC team, heading straight to clasp hands with the civilian government and spread out a negotiation framework. The Iranian side nods to fling open the door for all vessels not flying Western flags to slip through the strait immediately in exchange for exactly 48 hours of American bombing pause. Omani Foreign Minister Badr bin Hamad al-Busaidi, the exact person who once huddled in the Geneva room half a month ago, will board a plane to rush to Muscat and reconnect the line. Mr. Trump, who is glued to gasoline price boards, the S&P index, and poll columns, will nod to halt, loudly proclaim it a great victory, then hoist it onto Truth Social to boast. Mr. Netanyahu will writhe in protest, but Mr. Trump will brush it aside just as he once did in the Gaza Strip, just as his long-standing habit. Artillery falls silent, not forever, nor with any signed contract, but that much quiet is sufficient for the black gold to resume trickling. Brent crude slips down to the $85 mark. Gasoline drops to $5. The heavy pressure eases slightly. And right within that narrow, paper-thin sliver of 72 hours, someone will open their mouth to discuss what a genuine, real-price agreement would look like. And then another detail emerges. That is precisely the second path. Nothing guarantees it at all. People even doubt whether it has any chance of becoming reality. Yet there is still opportunity. And with the thick history of this patch of land, having opportunity equates to holding everything in hand. The question that makes people most uneasy right now is only one. Dear viewers, as you follow to this point, please imagine, on this Saturday morning, amid smoke and dust billowing from Kharg Island, the fleet of oil tankers dropping anchor waiting outside the Strait of Hormuz, gas station owners scattered across America hurriedly removing old price boards, while diplomats in Muscat and Doha clutch their telephones awaiting a ring that may never come. People are wondering whether that man who curtly typed, utterly defeated and desperately craving a commitment on Truth Social at 9 p.m. Friday night truly has the heart to open the way for an agreement that still leaves Iran a path to survive. Because that is the sole unique template of agreement capable of extinguishing the flame of war, both sides must have room to exist alongside it. Both sides must have grounds to loudly proclaim it a glory. From past to present, Mr. Trump has always hailed every instance of laying down arms as victory. This time he is fully capable of reusing that move. Standing at this three-way junction is not about choosing who is tougher or who is softer. Nor is it about placing America above all or going around soothing the world. This choice is starkly black and white on two sides. The moment to choose which one has already arrived with thunderous momentum within the next 72 hours, whether people like it or not. Because that strait cannot remain shut tight until old age. Because the black gold cannot hang suspended at the $100 mark year after year. Because the USS Gerald R. Ford vessel looms large out there. Because the K-Bar missile array is no toy. Because Mojtaba Khamenei still breathes and is seething with rage, while the IRGC team still grips triggers tightly. Because Mr. Masoud Pezeshkian still sits firmly in the presidential chair, Mr. Arachi still bears the diplomat title, and Mr. Badr bin Hamad al-Busaidi is still waiting to answer the call. The patch of land Kharg Island tonight is submerged in a sea of fire. That is the plain truth staring us in the face. The Iranian side just threatened on Saturday that it would roast any oil facility linked to America into a pile of slag should the oil pumping infrastructure on their island suffer so much as a scratch. That too is another stark truth. Then somewhere wedged between piles of slag and flames, squeezed between that Truth Social post and the K-Bar missile array, caught between Beijing's envoy and Mr. Netanyahu's veto tantrum, lying amid oil at $100 or $200, right in that narrow, hair-raising crack. The subsequent lines of the chronicle are taking shape. People are holding their breath, waiting to see whether it will be an agreement or once again roaring artillery, peace, or ever deeper escalation, a breakthrough escape, or a total collapse. The clock's hand is ticking steadily. And to conclude, at the mark of 8:47 p.m. Eastern Time, on that Friday, the 13th of March 2026, absolutely no one dares to swear which face the coin will land on. If you find this perspective worth pondering, please feel free to leave your thoughts below.